If we think that our challenge is resilience and sustainability, if we want to create communities that have greater capacity to deal with all this change, and it seems, and that's a big promise of design and of planning, that we probably have some major changes that have to occur in some of the backbone infrastructures. Transportation is one of them. I think most people hope that we'll have a more access-oriented, to put it in the language of engineers, a more access-oriented landscape, where we think about how people get from place to place in their daily lives. That might translate as a more intermodal kind of environment. In other words, being able to not only have multiple modes to choose from, but also having them connected, so that, like, if I, choose to ride my bike crazily as I do, all seasons of the year, I might occasionally want to ride the light rail, and so fortunately that works pretty nicely. You can pop your bike right on the light rail or on a bus, and that's a good example of an intermodal kind of capacity that we have. Our lines are becoming pretty well connected. Suburbia might change. It might become more clustered. It might become more this multifunctional landscape. The gist of it is that the suburbs will look less and less alike, that they'll feel less and less alike, and that they'll be much more connected to the actual infrastructures and resources that give them life, as it were. So suburbia is going to become more nimble and more flexible, and it's going to look a little different, but it's still going to have some of those baseline qualities that make it valuable, I think, as part of the American landscape. My glass half full version of rural areas and exurbia is that there will be a kind of recognition that, bank on the technology, I guess. I mean, that we can probably have it all, but we have to be extremely careful about how all is placed in the landscape in relationship, again, to these key resources, okay? So it might mean some redefinition of all. In other words, what all might look like might be a little different. I think we are, always in danger of dealing a kind of a death knell to the ecosystem in relationship to water. This is a key resource in this state. Our surface and groundwaters are we just take it for granted, and meanwhile we're pumping down the groundwater to really alarmingly low levels in many parts of particularly the metropolitan Twin Cities. So I think the city, as investigated in section, systemically, across scales, that's the city of the future, the city that's a city about process and about integration across all kinds of complex imperatives of survival. I think that'll be the city. It'll be a city that's less mediatized and much more in contact with the fundamental resources of life. It'll feel, ironically, less conventionally urban. Somehow urbanity was always about distancing ourselves from our resources. I think it'll be the other way. It's going to be about really being connected with our resources. This reconnection with resource bases is critical. And as I said, I think the city, maybe ironically, will be much more connected because it's more dependent on these resource spaces